My name is Grace Miller, and I'm 23 years old, living right here in Portland, Oregon. I spent my days working at a beloved independent bookstore cafe called the Literary Latte. It was the kind of place with exposed brick walls, shelves stacked high with books that smelled of old paper and new ideas, and the gentle hum of an espresso machine. I loved the atmosphere, the quiet moments between customers, and the conversations I'd have about literature while pouring a perfect latte. My job was important to me not just because I enjoyed it, but because every hour, every dollar was helping me save up for my dream of going back to school for a degree in library science. I wanted to be surrounded by stories forever, but I knew I needed to build my own future first. I prided myself on being a diligent worker, always on time, always willing to stay a little late if a customer was still browsing or if the evening closing tasks ran over. I thought that kind of dedication would be recognized and appreciated. The problem, though, wasn't immediately obvious. It was like a tiny crack in a window pane, easy to miss at first, but slowly growing bigger and bigger. Our boss, Mr. Harrison, was a smooth talker. He'd often say, "We're a family here at the Literary Latte," and talk about how much he valued his team. But beneath the warm words, there was a system that was quietly stealing from us bit by bit. Our paychecks were always slightly off, and it had to do with how our time was recorded. The official company policy stated that if you punched out at, say, 5 minutes past the hour, you'd only be paid until the hour. But if you stayed 12 minutes past, you'd be paid for 15 minutes. Mr. Harrison explained it away as a balancing act. He said it all evened out in the end, that sometimes we gained a few minutes, sometimes we lost a few, and over the course of weeks and months, it would all be fair. He smiled when he said it, and for a long time I believed him. We were family after all, and you trust your family, but deep down there was a growing unease. I needed every penny, and the math in my head just wasn't adding up. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach every time I punched out, seeing the digital clock display a time like 7 minutes past the hour, knowing those minutes, those 7 precious minutes of my time and effort would vanish into thin air. Mr. Harrison, with his perfectly pressed shirts and his expensive watch, was starting to look less like a benevolent father figure and more like a clever predator, lurking in the shadows of our beloved bookstore. I started to keep my own little ledger, a small notebook hidden in my apron pocket. Every shift, every punch in, every punch out, especially those frustrating moments when I stayed past my scheduled time, I jotted down. It wasn't long before a pattern emerged, a stark, undeniable truth. The balancing act Mr. Harrison talked about was a complete myth. We almost always lost time. The occasions where I got paid for those extra 15 minutes were rare, maybe 3 or 4 times over a whole year. But the times I stayed 7, 8, 9, or even 10 minutes late, getting paid for none of it, happened constantly. I did the calculations during my lunch breaks, hunched over my notebook in the quiet back corner of the cafe, the smell of roasted coffee beans filling the air around me. Over a year of working 3 or 4 shifts a week, mostly 4-hour shifts, the total amount of unpaid time was staggering. It wasn't just a few minutes here and there. It added up to almost 9 full hours of work for which I had never been paid. 9 hours. That was more than a full day's wage for me. My first attempt to solve the problem was hesitant. I tried to bring it up gently with Brenda, the assistant manager, a kind woman who had worked at the Literary Latte for years. I showed her my little notebook, my precise calculations. She looked at it with wide, worried eyes. "Oh, Grace," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, we all know Mr. Harrison he insists it's fine. He says it all evens out." She shrugged, a defeated slump to her shoulders. "What can we do?" Her reaction made me feel even more frustrated and alone. It wasn't just me, everyone knew, but everyone felt powerless. I decided to try a more direct approach. During a slow afternoon, I found Mr. Harrison in his office, tucked away behind a shelf of classic literature. I showed him my meticulous records, my numbers laid out clearly. He leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "Grace," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I appreciate your attention to detail, but this is how we've always done things. It's a system that works. Are you saying you don't trust our payroll?" He made it sound like I was accusing him of theft, which in a way I was. He dismissed my concerns, implying I was nitpicking and not understanding the bigger picture of running a small business. He even suggested that if I was so concerned about a few minutes, perhaps I wasn't as dedicated to the spirit of the literary latte as he thought. I left his office feeling defeated, my stomach churning. It felt like a punch to the gut. Things started to get worse after that. My shift hours were subtly cut, not drastically, but enough to make a difference in my paycheck. I was given less desirable closing shifts, which often ran over due to a surge of late customers or unexpected cleaning tasks, meaning I lost even more unpaid time. I saw other coworkers exchanging glances with me, a shared understanding in their eyes, but nobody dared to speak up. The atmosphere became tense. I felt like I was being watched, that every mistake I made, no matter how small, would be magnified. The financial strain was immense. I started dipping into my meager savings for school just to cover rent and groceries. I felt trapped. Was it even worth fighting for? My dream of library science felt like it was slipping further and further away, replaced by the bitter taste of injustice and the gnawing fear of losing my job. I was at my lowest point, wondering if I should just cut my losses and find another job, but the thought of letting Mr. Harrison get away with it, of letting him continue to steal from all of us, filled me with a quiet, burning rage. But that rage, that feeling of being completely cornered and wronged, became a fire inside me. I couldn't just walk away. My coworkers, especially Brenda, started to see how unfairly I was being treated, how my hours were cut, and how I was always assigned the shifts most likely to go past closing. One evening, after a particularly late closing where I stayed 20 minutes past my scheduled time, wiping down counters and restocking shelves while Mr. Harrison drove off in his fancy car, Brenda pulled me aside. Her eyes were teary. "Grace," she whispered, "he's doing it to you on purpose. He thinks if he makes it hard enough, you'll leave. Please don't give up." Her words, far from making me feel worse, reignited my determination. I wasn't alone. I decided I needed to escalate, not internally but externally. I spent hours researching labor laws for Oregon, printing out pages and pages of information. I found a local organization that helped workers understand their rights. I called them, shaking, and explained everything, my meticulous notes laid out before me. They listened patiently and told me I had a very strong case. They advised me on how to formally file a complaint with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries. It was a terrifying step, making an official complaint against my employer, the man who held my livelihood in his hands. But the thought of all those stolen minutes, all those lost dollars for me and my coworkers, pushed me forward. I filed the complaint, providing all my detailed records, the names of coworkers who could corroborate the rounding policy, and a clear explanation of how it violated state law. It was a painstaking process, but I didn't falter. A few weeks later, a representative from the Bureau contacted Mr. Harrison, demanding an explanation and all his payroll records. The tension in the Literary Latte was palpable. Mr. Harrison was furious, stomping around, questioning everyone, trying to figure out who had ratted him out. He called a meeting with all staff, his face red, trying to intimidate us, telling us that these kinds of complaints just hurt everyone and could force him to make difficult decisions about staffing. But I stood my ground, my chin held high, looking him straight in the eye. I could feel the support of my coworkers, a silent shield around me. Then came the day of reckoning. The Bureau of Labor and Industries ruled decisively in our favor. Not only did they confirm that the rounding policy was illegal and unfair, but they ordered Mr. Harrison to immediately change the payroll system to pay employees to the minute they punch out. This was a huge victory, the first step in reclaiming what was rightfully ours, but the consequences didn't stop there. The Bureau also demanded that Mr. Harrison provide back pay for all employees for all their unpaid working past shift end time. This wasn't just for me, it was for every single employee who had been shortchanged by his fraudulent system. The news spread like wildfire through the cafe. There were hugs, tears, and a collective sigh of relief. Mr. Harrison, stripped of his power, was forced to comply. The Bureau of Labor and Industries also levied a hefty fine against him for wage theft and labor violations, a cost far greater than the few minutes he thought he was saving. His smug smile was gone, replaced by a bitter scowl. Our new normal at the Literary Latte was revolutionary. Now if we were stuck past the end of our shift, even for a minute, we were paid for that time, right down to the minute. The back pay for all employees started rolling out over the next few months, appearing as separate checks, a tangible reminder of what we had fought for. My own check was a significant amount, enough to put me back on track for my college savings and then some. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about respect, about dignity, about knowing that our time and effort were finally valued. Mr. Harrison, despite being forced to change his ways, still tried to maintain a facade of control. He sent out a company-wide email trying to frame the changes as proactive improvements he was making for employee satisfaction. But we all saw through it. We knew the truth, and the feeling of empowerment among the staff was electric. We held regular meetings in the break room, discussing our rights, sharing information. Brenda, once timid, was now a vocal advocate. We realized our collective power, and the momentum didn't stop. We started seriously discussing the next step, something that would permanently protect us from future exploitation, something that would give us a real, strong voice. We began to organize, quietly at first, then more openly, taking the initial steps to unionize. It was a long road ahead, but we were no longer afraid. We were united. The aroma of coffee and old books still filled the Literary Latte, but now mixed with it was the sweet scent of justice and the promise of a truly fair workplace.